You can just say, well, let me tell a little story here, rather than start out with my life as a little girl or something like that, and then go ahead into that.
Shannon, the voices are being recorded too.
She'll be nice then. She can be nice.
I don't think you want to send her over there. She'll just get into
No,
stuff.
she'll really pick on her.
Shannon, come here.
She'll sit there with Grandpa
quiet.
and be a nice girl. She just had to understand it.
Well, go ahead.
Well, can I ask her a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, now we have that little picture of you when you were a little girl, you know, and you had your, wasn't it your little parasol, and you tickled me the way you held it out there. Just
yeah. Well, I didn't know what to do with it, so I just stood down there. Yeah, that was on the 24th of July, and we'd been.
What would you say, 4 or 5 years old? About Shannon's age, something like that?
I think about Shannon's age, something
You
like
weren't
that.
too old there, as far as I recollect the picture.
No. And we had gone over to Dewey's Grove. One of the LDS families there by the name of Dewey, they had a grove that they, it was a recreation place where the people came and had picnics and whatever, you know, and then he had a dance hall.
Oh.
And that, and so this is where we had the 24th of July celebration, and we had played and played all day. See, that was taken. We had some pictures taken the same day, Merle and I, with Hulda's oldest sister's family, Delbert and Charles.
Yeah.
And so we had been playing out there, and we were so tired, and then they called us in and said they wanted our pictures, and so they took our pictures, and that's why we looked so sleepy-eyed.
Yeah.
We were about ready for our afternoon nap.
Well, now, when you say you played, what did you play?
We played games, and
what kind of games did you play with then? Did you play tag, or did you?
Well, different games that they were. I think was kind of the primary was, you know, they had their teacher, you know, out there.
Oh, it wasn't a family thing then, huh?
No, it was for the whole ward. You know, all the LDS people in the Emmett Valley.
Oh.
And it was a regular 24th of July celebration.
So did they just call you in by families to take your picture, or by classes?
No,
or?
just that my mother wanted a picture, and so she just thought that was a good opportunity and took advantage of it. And I guess there was a photographer there, you know, that was handy, and so they just. But I'm glad they got that picture, because we wouldn't have got one if it hadn't been for that.
Well, yeah, because I don't think that's the only one I see of you as a little girl, if I remember.
Well, I had one when I went to school, first went to school, first year in school. But it wasn't a nice picture like that. Well, anyway, we moved from Emmett the spring of 1919. Bill had just gotten home from war, and the family wondered what they were going to do, and my brother Art had been working for Carter over on the Clinton ranch, over on the bench from Emmett, and he'd worked there for a number of years, and so he had gained quite a lot of knowledge in you know, the farming, and he thought the business end and so forth of that. And so the family was kind of in a confused condition right at that time. They didn't know what they wanted to do. And how they got in touch with this farm up here to ranch up to Dietrich, I don't know. But anyway, it belonged to Charles Albers. He was one of they were millionaires, actually. They cereal oats. You know,
Oh,
company.
that Albers now.
Yeah.
I think it's still.
Well, I think it is, yeah. Well, this was one of the partners. And so they owned this, Charles, I think, either was just or something. Anyway, we decided that they would go up here to Dietrich and rent this ranch. We were giving, I think, $2,000 a year for cash rent for it, which was a lot of money, it seems to me like at that time. And so we kept that for, I think it was 4 years. We kept that till the spring of 23, so that'll be 4 years.
Do you think they made any money off of it?
Well, now Art and Dell was running it at first, and they claimed that they didn't make any money off of it. Well, so they took some their share of the horses and stuff. Of course, they had contributed stuff when they went in partners, and so then they turned the place and the indebtedness and everything over to Bill.
Well, that's nice.
And at that time, they were just getting into raising mules. We had a string of mares, and they were beautiful mares, and so they raised mules. Of course, that takes time. And so then they were, Bill run the place, I think it was 2 years, and the second year, he really built things up. He built up cattle and everything. And he was pretty shrewd when it come to business. And so about all Art got out of that was the success he got out of the business deals with Charles Albers was just to blow off. You know, he didn't really succeed in gaining anything from. He just got so mad at him, you know, that he told him one day that he says, Charles Albers, he says, when you die, he says, I'm going to locate your grave, and he says, and I'm going to go out and mess all over it.
He was mad at him, huh?
He was mad at him, see, but that's about all as far as he got. Now Bill was different. They set, Charles Albers had Bill set in another room, and Bill was acquainted with the attorney, Frank Disney. And of course, Frank had been through all of this with Art and with a lot of other ranters, you know. And Charles was one of those shrewd guys.
Yeah.
But
how come he was a millionaire?
That's how come he was a millionaire. And one of the sneaky things he did was he'd come around the ranch there when the men folks were busy, you know, or gone someplace, and then he and his wife would give us candy, and Merle and I candy, and then they'd quiz us, see, about things. And then another thing,
and you didn't have any idea what they
No,
were
we
doing.
didn't have any idea. They, you know, we were taught to be nice to people, you know, and that, and after all, they were giving us candy. But anyway, I know they found out things that way, see, from us. But later they didn't, because we were tutored then that we were being taken financially from them, and for us to not give out any more information. So then even the storekeeper, we had 2 stores there, and Jack Houston was very nice, and he was a friend of the family. But the other one, she was kind of taken in with Charles Albers and his wife. They were people of means and so forth. And
she was trying to get part of it.
Yeah, and feather her nest. And so then she would try to quiz us. And one day, she said, well, she says, you don't know very much, do you? And I says, well, you know, I said, I live in the house. I don't live out in the barn. I don't know what's going on out there. And so she never did ask me anymore. Well, she'd ask me how many cows we had, how many calves we had. Oh, I don't know, all kinds of
Oh, I see, that kind of questions,
Yeah.
To see what you had, and maybe they could get more out of you.
Yeah, they came and even stole our chickens and stuff like that. Took them when we weren't there. But anyway, we decided that, our dad did, over to Burley. He had a half brother living over here, and somehow or other they got to find out about this promoter, land promoter that had a bunch of land up in Montana. Yes, and so they asked the Bishop Pratt, about what was all about this, and well, he didn't know anything, you know, he hadn't been up there, but he says, well, I guess it's all right, it sounds good, you know, and that, and so instead of my dad going up there and seeing what was there, he didn't. Of course, if he had seen that country and everything before he moved up there, he'd have fell in love with it anyway, because it was a great big flat, beautiful ground, black ground, and rich soil, and so it was just wonderful from the looks. Well, anyway, we took our belongings and shipped it by rail up to Havre, Montana, and so we got settled up there in the place, and that my brother Ed and Dale, and Ed had a family. Janita was, actually, Janita was born in my bed over here in Dietrich.
Is that right?
Yeah, see, I had a room by myself because there was only one girl. So I had a room. And so when they came up there, why then Teresa was expecting, and so I slept somewhere else. I don't remember where.
You gave her your bed then.
Yeah. And so I remember I was there that day. I heard the baby cry after it was born. My mother delivered it. And
they must have just barely got there then, huh?
Well, they'd been there, I guess, a few weeks or something like that. I don't remember that. But anyway, there was no one there, only Ed and my mother in the room, you know. Pretty soon I heard the baby cry. Of course, I knew that there was a baby coming.
Yeah.
And so everything went along just fine. Well, then when we moved up to Montana, they went with us. And then they were going to get part of this land, you know, certain 80 acres or whatever it was. And so they got out and Ed got out and worked, and they prepared the land and that. And then when Bill got up there, why then he began to look around and quiz and talk and everything.
Because he was the business head, yeah.
Yeah. And so then he found out that they hadn't even floated the bonds for to
what does that mean? You mean they hadn't raised the money, in other words?
Yeah, they had made arrangements for the money, you see. Yeah. It was all on the blueprint, but nothing done about it, see. Now I'm not sure just how that would be. Do you, Dad? They said they hadn't floated the bonds for the
well,
irrigation
they were
canals.
preparing the land, and there was no ditches.
Yeah, no ditches, no canals,
no canals, no nothing.
So where was they going to get their irrigation water? See?
Mom, how old were you then?
I was 15.
15, so you
Was there enough rain that you think they could have irrigated it by the rain a little bit?
Montana and blue skies.
Oh, no, I guess not.
That was the coldest place in the United States, considered. It was east and north of Great Falls. Well, anyway, when we found out what we'd gotten into and that we'd made a mistake, why, we took of course we didn't have anything mortgaged. They were all clear. Everything was clear that we had with us. And we had 3 wagons.
You just lost $10,000 basically, huh?
Oh, I guess we lost everything we had. You know, all the...
It seems to me I heard Bill say that he had 10,000 or more in it. Involved.
You ought to sit over closer so he could focus on you too, Grandpa.
I think he did too, because you see, Bill stayed there to get his money out of these mules and stuff that he had sold.
Yeah.
And so that took a little time to arrange that for that much. So he had that money when he came. But then we had the expense then keeping us until we could find something else. And we shipped down there. We shipped over the Blue Mountain, no, the Rocky Mountains from Glacier National Park on over to Columbia Falls. Wasn't too far in miles, only about 60 miles over there, but there was no road.
Yeah.
So then we shipped over there. That was sure funny. You know, it was cold there in Glacier Park, and the wind was blowing, and I tell you, it was just like it was going to blow right through you, and it was cold, just to make you shiver. And we got on that train that night, and shipped over the mountains, got in early the next morning to Columbia Falls, and stepped out into spring. Just beautiful, you know. It was just pretty near like going from here in the wintertime down to Arizona.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was so much different. And we didn't see any more cold weather until, well, not any. And so then they began to try to find something to do. And I don't know where they came up with the idea of clearing land. But anyway, they figured, well, we can put the horses to work, you know, and in which they did. We cleared 80 acres of land. It had pine trees and all sizes. And we cleared that all off so they could farm it. So they had to take the stumps out.
Now, were they hiring out for people, or were they
no,
doing it
they
for their
contracted this for a certain price, and I don't know what the price was.
How old were you then, Mom?
I was 15.
Oh, you're still, that's just right
yeah.
after the...
When we moved up there, see, we moved up in the early spring. I don't remember, well, it must have been around the 10th of March anyway, or 15th of March. Or was it quite that? No, I don't believe it was quite that early. I think it was a little later than that, because
so that is
we...
19 what?
1923. And you see, we shipped up there by rail, by railroad. And so then we just put our stuff in the wagons and drove the wagons. Oh, we were sure proud of those beautiful horses. They had a string of horses that was just beautiful. And my dad drove one wagon, and Bill drove one.
Now this is after you found out you couldn't make anything of it besides...
Yeah, we decided that we'd made a mistake, and so the best thing to do was get out of it.
Yeah.
And so I think it was about 275 miles that we... yeah, that we drove. Yeah, we drove about 275 miles with those horses. Yeah. And do you know what happened then? Hey, do you know what happened then? Well, we took all those old stumps right out of the ground. Yeah.
You're missing the best part.
And your great-grandfather, Peter William Casper, he's the guy that stuck those big, what do you call them? The dynamite, sticks of dynamite in the ground. They made some holes. Yeah, they made some holes in the ground and stuck those pieces of dynamite in there. And then they lit a match to the fuse, and pretty soon it went boom. And there'd go the stumps all over. And so then the men had come with the horses, and they'd pull those little roots that didn't get blown out, and they'd clear it all up and burn the stumps, and they'd have it all nice and pretty so they could plow it, and then they could grow crops on it. And this is what they did for a man by the name of Horai. He was a Japanese.
Oh.
They were Japanese people.
Well, so they weren't afraid to go ahead and clear, even though there wasn't going to be any canals? Is that what?
No. Now look, we were down to Columbia Falls.
Oh, you moved out of there,
this
and
is
then
after we
cleared it at the end.
We figured there wasn't anything there for us at Hammer, so we moved right out. And then, do you know what happened? We got that 80 acres all cleared up, and it was fall. My goodness, it was going to be winter pretty soon. And so then we sold the horses, the wagons, sold the horses and the wagons, and took our personal things and the organ and trunks and stuff like that, and shipped them to Fred and Hulda's. Told them that we were on our way to California, and for them to look out for that stuff until we got back. So we bought us a pretty little red Overland car. A pretty little red Overland car. Now that wouldn't have been the car that we would have bought if your great-grandmother and I had our way. We'd have bought us a Dodge. But anyway, we got that pretty little red Overland and went to California and down to see Aunt Hattie and Uncle Frank. And we got situated with them. And Bill and Merle would had gone, they were working up around Modesto or Madeira, around that area. And they were coming down the highway one morning, and Merle was driving. He started to make a left-hand turn to give the signal, and this guy run into him, and the car was never the same again. We couldn't keep any bearings after that. And wouldn't you know that the guy didn't have any insurance? He didn't have nothing we could collect. So then that's the time that. Oh, I want to tell you more about getting out of there. We started out of Kalispell. That's where we sold our horses and stuff, was Kalispell.
You did all this stump digging and clearing, and then you sold your...
Columbia Falls, and then we sold our stuff, our whole outfit. We waited there a couple of weeks or so to decide just what we wanted to do, just what we better do. And Dad and Mother wanted to get out of there. They were not happy there. After all, they were a long ways from home.
Well, yeah.
And so we went to California, and they loved that idea. Dad loved to travel. So did I. Well, anyway, we started out of Kalispell, and so we'd shipped all of our stuff, and just took our suitcases and what clothes and stuff we wanted to take with us. And so we had that all tied on the car, and beddings rolled up and everything, and we I don't know just how far we were out of Kalispell, but we figured, well, we'd go a ways that night. It must have been towards afternoon before we got started, because we didn't make any big distance, until it seemed like it was getting towards evening. And we stopped at a place, and I guess it was just to see what was going on or something, and he asked questions if we were on the right road or whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, this guy came to the car, up beside the car, and he looked in, and of course Dad, Mother, and I were in the back, sitting in the back seat. And he stuck his head right in, there and looked there. And my Dad was sitting there with a gun between his legs. And this guy looked in there and seen my Dad. And I don't think that he missed anything. But he talked to Bill and Merle, and the story he told us there was no place that we'd better stay there for the night, because that was foolhardy to go any farther, because there was absolutely no place to even turn out. Can you imagine that? No place to even turn out.
Yeah.
And so Bill says, well, he says, I think we'll just go on, he says. And so we did. And there were beautiful places to turn out.
He was going to take you and fleece you good, I suppose.
He had heard that we had sold our stuff and we were carrying money, in which we were.
Yeah.
And my Dad had
intentions of keeping it too.
Yes. He had the big roll himself. And he had a gun right there, and he'd have used it. But anyway, I don't know how far we rode that night, but I know that Bill drove part of the way. And I'll tell you how we did fly. We went in around those trees, my goodness. And I think we got up nearer another place. It probably was a lumbering place or something. Because the next morning, it was only just a little ways until we were there.
Yeah.
And that was around Bonner's Ferry. It was right up in the Panhandle of Idaho. So we were going from Montana over to on down that way, Spokane. I think is where we were headed. And so then we stopped and found a nice place.
What year was that?
That was that same year, 22. That was in the fall. I'd had my birthday when I was 16 now. And
Shut the door.
we made a big family bed up there. And I remember that Bill and Merle didn't do much sleeping. You know, they were a little worried. And I guess my dad didn't either. I know he didn't, knowing him. Nor my mother either, but I went to sleep. And then the next morning we got up bright and early and rolled our beds up and went on into, it seems like it was a Bonner's Ferry, right up in the Panhandle of Idaho. And things were okay from then on. We felt like we were okay. And then we went on down to Hood River and met Vi and her first husband, Ed Taylor, and my brother Ed and Teresa, and their two little kids. They were working in the fruit down at Hood River. And then they later come down to California. On the way down to California, we got over about on the California line there, around Mount Shasta area, somewhere around there. And of course, they didn't have the highways they've got now, so they were the roads were not too good. And I think we were around Eureka or someplace around there. And we came to a little dip in the road, and we were following another car. And when the guy got to the bottom there, he stopped. Completely stopped, stone still, right in front of us. And Bill run into him. And Bill was shaken up. He says, I can handle my car. I can put it any place I want it. But I can't read the minds of somebody else. He says, I nearly killed my family. My dad, my mother, my sister.
It was his fault.
No, it wasn't his fault. Well, we didn't do much damage to him. We just kind of run. It seems like the car kind of run up on the tire a little bit, you know. But it didn't stop anybody. They just, the guy pulled ahead and went on, you know. But it scared Bill up, and he wouldn't drive anymore. That's why he wouldn't drive. And so then, of course, when they had the other wreck down at in California, why then Merle was driving. He turned the wheel over to Merle, and Merle drove from then on. But we got into California. Found Frank and Hattie's, found them, and we spent the winter down in that area. Got what jobs we could. I worked for Barker was their name. They run a clothing store there, and I worked for them in their home a little too.
Kind of as a maid, you mean?
Yeah, kind of cleaning and one thing and another, to kind of give me a job, and then they wanted me to work in the store a little bit, and they said, I wish you'd stay down there. When we decided to come back, well, I wish you'd stay down here. She says, we could make a good clerk out of you. And she liked my work.
Well, yeah, you were taught to work, and you were responsible.
She says, you know, of all the girls I've had to work for me, you're the only one that moved the furniture out to clean underneath them.
Well, yeah.
And you got in the corners. And so I enjoyed it, enjoyed them. They were really a very interesting couple, and they made you feel like you were kind of one of the family, not a maid.
Yeah.
So I got a big bang out of that. And but evidently they didn't have means to keep me all the time, so they got me another job to work for someone, this lady, her husband, I believe he was a baker, run the bakery there in Madera, California, and he had some big girls. They were larger than I was, but they were about my age. And so the husband came home, and there I was ironing and working around the home, and I don't know what his daughters were doing, but anyway, there were different arrangements made. And so I lost my job.
Yeah.
We spent the winter there, as I said, and in the spring, early in the spring, the hoof and mouth disease broke out in the cattle, and so to get out of then California was quarantined, and everybody that was in there, and so when we came out, we had to run the car through a dipping vat, you know, so as to disinfect the tires and everything. And we decided we didn't want to be quarantined in California. That wasn't what we wanted. So we decided to go back to Idaho. And Henry and Lizzie were at Shoshone when we had left the spring before. But during this time, they had moved down to Meridian and had rented, I believe it was 160 acres, and there was 160 acres just across the road from them that was for rent. And so we rented that. And that way, then we could kind of exchange work with Henry, and so we got along just fine. And then that fall, Merle and Bill did a little peddling and bought a truck, and then they moved over to Emmett. Got on the big farm just east of Emmett, above the Black Canyon. After we left Havre, Montana, and was before we got too very far, I think about 100 miles from there, 75, 100 miles, we run into the Army grasshoppers, and they in places they were so thick that they just crushed underneath the wagon wheels, and they were even attacking the fence posts and anything that was wood. And people were moving out. Some people had already moved out, and they were leaving the country. Of course, they were being eaten out, and so there was nothing to stay for. And this was quite an experience. I never saw so many grasshoppers in my life.
They were Army grasshoppers.
Army grasshoppers.
Did they look different than what we got?
They're small, quite small, the Army grasshoppers, as I recall. And that's why they called them Army grasshoppers. And they were really an army. There was no kidding about it. There was millions and millions and millions of them. And they at that time they didn't have anything to fight them with, you know. Nowadays we'd have sprays and stuff, but then.
Did they try burning them or anything like that?
I don't know. I didn't see any place where they did. I imagine that they were so thick that they. I don't know, Harold. I really don't know. I didn't hear or see anything that no fire or anything. So I really don't know. But
I guess our day's coming. They
well,
planted the grasshoppers this year.